So I'm going to go ahead and start our Zoom today with Jason Stoddard of Schiit Audio. I welcome everybody for today's gathering. We will be taking questions for Jason to answer later. If you would put your questions into the chat, and then I will read them later on once he finishes his initial talking and getting to whatever he wants to speak about. That will be great. And then we may have people, if they want to use the raise your hand function later on, if you have another question that you don't want to, for whatever reason, put into the chat, that would be great as well. My name is Jim Bird. I'm on the board of the Audiophile Foundation. We also have Leslie Linden here, who is our president. And I'm really pleased to have Jason Stoddard of Schiit Audio here to talk about all shitty things today. He started with Mike Moffat back in 2010 to start Schiit Audio. Jason came from Sumo, and Mike Moffat was formerly of Theta. And Jason, in addition to being the audio guru that he is, he's also a writer. He's written some science fiction books and many, many, many articles in the realm of our hobby and audiophilia. And with that, I'm going to leave it to Jason to take it off.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, or, I guess maybe good evening, depending on where you are. It's 3 o'clock-ish where I'm at the moment. And, I think a lot of people know kind of who we are, or think they know who we are. But yeah, about 14 years ago, we sold our first product online. And we've always kind of been a direct sale audio company, specializing in entry-level, products. For a while, people were saying, you're a leader in the desktop audio space. Yeah, meaning we make small things. Small little devices. Typically headphone-based. Now, today, we actually have a pretty broad line. We have a lot of what people call two-channel, which I find kind of hilarious to differentiate it from surround, I guess. We have a tiny little bit of surround stuff that is our own way of looking at things. It does not actually adhere to any standards at all, but it works with everything. And we have everything from, fairly typical big iron power amps and preamps, down to still a lot of, tiny stuff that works with headphones. As far as structure goes, I'm one of the founders with Mike Moffat. I am the analog designer, so I design, pretty much all the analog stuff, unless Dave has a hand in that. And Mike Moffat is the head of digital. He is really basically the visionary now. We have a digital team of 4 people that actually do the vast majority of digital, where we have a lot of IP, where we actually, instead of using someone else's USB input, we have our own USB input. Instead of using someone else's DAC or digital filter, we have our own digital filter. We have our own multi-bit architecture using typically either defense or medical kind of grade devices, typically not used in audio. In fact, I don't think anyone uses the DACs we're using on the higher end. And on the analog side, we're kind of similarly idiosyncratic. I do mainly discrete designs. We use almost no op-amp gain stages. We don't do Class D. We basically don't do a lot of things that you might expect to see at our price point. We even do a few things with tubes. We have a $149 tube headphone amplifier going up to about $1,000 tube preamplifier, a balanced tube preamp. So it's weird, So how would I put us today? Well, in a couple months, you might have a very different view of us because we're going to be introducing some really interesting things. But we're kind of the idiosyncratic or iconoclastic, relatively inexpensive, entry-level, but still shooting at true high-end features and performance type company that we actually don't do a lot of what I would call the more leading edge, products. We don't do streamers, things like that, because that's highly software based, and until you actually get into software, it's going to be difficult for us to compete in something unless we actually commit to it. So that's where we are now. Things are going to be changing pretty radically this year, though, and I can talk about some of it. Can't talk about other stuff. I'll tell you everything I know. So if you have questions, I say, bring them on.
Well, I have one question for you. Well, I have a couple actually, but in terms of your approach to design, can you talk about when you come up with an idea, what's at your company, the time frame of coming up with the initial concept? Okay, maybe when you first did the Yggy DAC and we're going to do an R2R DAC, and you were just a number of years ago from I think we want to go down this road and build this, to putting together a team, making some versions of it, listening to it, playing with it, to coming out with something you're actually willing to then put out on the market. Can you talk a little bit about your approach, about how that works then, and maybe how that's going now in terms of designing new products?
Yeah, and the time to market is fairly variable. It really depends on it. Are you talking about a small headphone amplifier, or are you talking about a very complex product like Yggdrasil, the DAC? Mm-hmm. That's actually hilarious. That's the DAC that Mike wanted to do from like day one. I said, I actually got together with Mike. I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing an audio company again. We'll start, inexpensive desktop stuff. Would you like to do DACs? And he's like, oh, I'd love to get back into audio. I'd love to do DACs. And so he came to me with this idea for Yggdrasil, and I'm like, this is great. But did you hear anything about like it being small, desktop, and cheap? So because Yggdrasil is a gigantic, modular architecture type DAC. So we actually pivoted, went to Bifrost. Bifrost was our first less expensive DAC. It was, I think, $349 when it first came out, but it was still modular and upgradable. And so Mike got his modularity, his upgradability, but it was based on some fairly standard Delta Sigma technology at the time. Still, despite that, I think Stereophile actually said of the original Bifrost that it's the highest value DAC they've ever seen, period. And that's kind of like one of our keywords is value. We are, if you actually look at our stuff and you actually look at the feature set and you compare it to other stuff out there, you'll see very, very high value. That's one of the things that we always do.
Okay. We've got a couple of chat questions. One gentleman wanted to know, well, you kind of touched upon it, Mike Moffat's role with this shit. So you said that does your digital architecture in digital design within the company. What else does he do? And you guys, in terms of were you leading the company? Is it kind of like you and him get together and work on stuff, or does he kind of squirrel himself away designing really fantastic digital stuff and let someone else deal with the HR or the publicity side of it? Or
yeah, a little. It's a little of both. We're actually we're about 40 people now total in the company. So we may not be quite as small as you think we are. Mike's primary role is essentially digital architecture and digital vision. He has he has a whole bunch of new stuff that's coming out that really is different than what you've seen before, and it's like not just DACs, not just streamers. It's actually a whole new class of products. So he excels in that. He excels in pulling a team together, and actually he hides a lot of the stuff he does from me, until it's actually ready, and that's fine. It's like I would rather him have the freedom to explore things without me saying, market-wise, that's not such a great idea, because if there is any marketing here, it's really me, and I do a fairly horrible job of it because all I do is I tell people what's going on in the company, write, various chapters, on Headfi, and, explain things in a fairly basic manner as far as I know. We have 0 salespeople. There's nobody else in marketing. It's like what you see is what you get.
Very good. Very good. I'm going to read some questions here. What role does price point play in your design of a product? Is there ever a thought that you would design a price no object piece, or do you feel that's a waste of effort?
It's funny. Yggdrasil is actually what we consider a price no object piece. That's currently, I think the lower end was $22.99. The higher end one is $26.99, unless I'm mistaken. But it's in that ballpark. You might go, wait, that sounds cheap. Actually, for us, it's a price point that lets us do like the maximal value. So it is really performing at a much higher level than what you might think. Mike and I had talks about this, and he's like, yeah, we could do something better than Yggdrasil. But at that point, you're probably talking about, putting things in ovens, individual characterization of parts, things like that, where you're going to go from 2,000 to 12,000. It's a very large delta. And he's like, I don't feel that that's what we should be doing. Totally relevant for other people to, push, that the limits on that, but it's not what we do. It's also, we don't spend a lot of money on chassis. I mean, you can kind of see the chassis are nice, but they're not milled out of a solid block of aluminum. They don't weigh, 150 pounds. They aren't like some retro steampunk aesthetic that, costs $1 million to make. We're trying to I keep coming back to this, value thing. And I think that's the best way to actually describe what we're trying to do. So for us, yes, we've actually attacked cost no object. Yggdrasil and Tier, the power amp that I did, it's a mono power amp that has a choke input power supply. Each of these has like a 11-pound choke inside the amp, which no one does anymore just because they're expensive, they're weird. It lowers your overall power output because you have losses through the choke, etc. But we did it, and people seem to really like them. I believe that's also like Stereophile Class A rated, unless I'm wrong. Honestly, I don't keep up on a lot of the marketing stuff, I'm afraid.
Or, why did you decide to manufacture everything in the U.S. instead of offshore, given that you are trying to keep the price point down? How are you successful doing this when others say they can't?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, the main reason that we decided to do it in the U.S. is because it's possible. We actually, when we started, I didn't know if it was possible. So we went out, designed products, got prices from U.S. manufacturers, that actually do our chassis and do our PC boards. And we were surprised that, yes, it is actually completely possible to do things in the U.S. at a reasonably low cost. Now, you don't see us selling any, $30 headphone amplifiers like you see on Amazon from some offshore manufacturers. There is a floor. We won't take on things like doing dongles, like you use for some portable gear, because the floor of that is very, very low. That's a price range that starts in the $30 to $60 range. Mm-hmm. That's very difficult. The $100, $150 range is difficult, but quite doable in the U.S. Above that, I don't know why you would go overseas. I much prefer actually having complete control of what we're doing. We can literally drive to the guys who are building our chassis. We can drive to the guys who are making our PC boards. The transformers are made here. The vast majority of everything is made here. The stuff that isn't, we usually call out. If you look at our website, it kind of says, the wallwort for a Magni is not made here. It's made in Taiwan at the moment. And so we think that the close coupled ability of us to actually oversee not only what our guys are assembling, but who's working for us, the guys making chassis, et cetera. Our ability to actually see what's going on and adjust as necessary is much better than either A, having to go overseas all the time to see it, or B, just trust that it's going to be okay. So that's a choice we made. That is a thing that I see continuing for the future.
That's great. Yeah. Would love to hear about your adventure into turntables. What were the thinking, strategy, challenges, lessons learned in the turntable product? Will it come back? Question mark.
Oh boy, I'm going to have a sip of beer for that one. The main thought process was Mike wanted to do a turntable, and he wanted to do an odd turntable, one that had some very, very high performance attributes, very low mass, very long, tone arm, a lot of really neat high end features. The catch with turntables we found is, there's a lot of specialized knowledge, design, and design for something that actually moves that we're not the best at. We actually produced a turntable. It worked fairly well, but actually managing the extremely high level of precision of something that moved and then actually making it, usable for normal humans. You should actually see the setup video we did for ours. It's insane. It's definitely not take it out of the box, plug it in, and it works.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a very high performance solution that was very hard to use and very hard to manage. And so we decided we're not going to take that on anymore. So that's why we ended up doing a CD player, which we can buy the drive from a very good company, from Stream Unlimited, but the rest of it is ours, and the only thing moving is either the drive or the drawer. We apparently can manage that, something that has strings and counterweights and pivots, and maybe not so much.
Right. I did see that you do have a CD transport. Is that just Redbook? By the way, I should go to the page, or is that something that can read, maybe up into the SACD 9224 realm, or no, just Redbook?
It's just Redbook, but it's also an oddball thing, because if you actually look at it, look at the back of it, you'll notice it has USB inputs and outputs. It actually has 2 USB inputs, 1 USB output. So not only can you play a CD to USB output, you can actually run your other USB devices into it and transcode that out to SPDIF if you want, or you can basically use it to switch what you're using. So if you have multiple USB devices, it's kind of a nice little hub for that. That's another Mike Moffat idea that he said this is probably the way to do it, because what happens when you do have a streamer and a computer, or multiple USB devices.
Well, speaking of USB, I know you have written that, I don't know if it was you or Mike who felt that USB sucks. And do you still feel it sucks? And if so, what do you think is the best, in your experience, and in talking with Mike, the best interface to go into a DAC, or from a, whether it's a solid state drive or a streamer, or, getting information into something like a Yggy or a Gumby or whatever? What do you think is the best interface, and why?
Mike actually, with the introduction of Unison USB, which was 3 or 4 years ago now, he actually believes that is the best interface.
Okay.
He does not, AES is still good. Basically he likes pretty much anything except for TOSlink, and then that's about it. As long as it's not TOSlink, I think he's happy. But he likes our USB solution, better than anything else. Of course he does, right? Or else we wouldn't be making it.
Okay. Some questions here. Hi, Jason. What exactly can you divulge about the upcoming company changes and product portfolio? You mentioned there were a few things that you can discuss. Please do tell.
Okay, I can say that, yeah, we are going through a lot of change right now. We're actually in the process of 3 years ago, we moved half the company to Corpus Christi, Texas from California. And so that half of the company makes the smaller products, the less complex products. We're now following that up by moving the rest of the company to San Antonio, Texas. And in the case of both Corpus and San Antonio, we're moving from like leased spaces in California to owned places here. So this is our foundation. This is our future. Yeah, there's a lot of upheaval involved, but it's really, we're doing all the planning we can to make sure that there will be minimal upset. In fact, I know as of this week, the shipment started from Valencia to San Antonio, where we're actually moving like 4,500 finished units out so we can ship while we get everyone new trained. Everyone in Valencia was offered, the ability to keep their job at their same rate if they wanted to move to San Antonio. We helped some people move. Some people chose to come with us. Some people didn't. But we do have the majority of the team, especially the QC side, coming to San Antonio. That might prompt some questions about what's going to happen to the shitter, which is our retail store, our single brand retail store that we have in Newhall, California. And right now, it does look like we're looking for to open something very near San Antonio Riverwalk to be the new space for that. But that's just kind of the company stuff. In addition to that, we have some new products coming, some new tech coming. I have mentioned to everyone that we are working on a Gunyer 2, which is going to be quite a bit different than what we've done before. If you're familiar with Bifrost 2 and its upgradability, it's similar to that. It takes it a few steps farther. It also introduces some new thought with respect to the multi-bit architecture, which I believe we're going to call multi-form now. Sorry, there's a little bit of marketing in my head, and it's usually making up stupid names for things. We have a lot of dumb names, and we have Unison, and we have multi-form and stuff like that. Hopefully next year we will be also introducing our own Delta Sigma technology. We've been working on a Delta Sigma modulator for some time. That appears to be, solid and good, and we'll probably be doing that as well as another option for people. So at that point, we literally have, we don't use anyone's DAC at that point. We don't even use, a TI DAC 11001B. It's just all our thing. So that's kind of like what's coming as far as on the digital side. On the analog side, we have some new stuff that I can't talk about, but I did mention to everyone that we are going to be doing a tube phono preamp. So that's coming probably later this year, and that'll be along the lines of if you're familiar with Skull, which is our step-up phono preamp with remote control, a bunch of loads, a lot of different gain options. And I think one of the key things about the upcoming tube phono, which we're calling Starnia, is that it will do moving coil levels of gain. It'll actually have 60 dB of gain without having either a preamp based on JFETs or transformer or anything. It'll be 100% 60 dB of tube gain, no hidden stuff in there, and that's those are the two things I can definitely talk about. You know, by that you kind of know, oh, they're shooting at kind of a higher level because both of these are going to be, you know, products that are in the 1xxx, you know, number range. They'll be $1,000 something dollars. They won't be $100.
Sure.
And that's, you know, that's kind of where we're heading this year. There'll be a couple really, really big surprises that will come along with that. And hopefully I can talk about that soon, but, you know, sorry about the cloak and dagger, but it is a really big deal.
Understandable. Is there any plan to take the Yggy another step higher or to revise it? Because it's been kind of in the same place, at least for about a year or so now, I believe. And, you know, I mean, maybe not this year, but over the, you know, over the next 2-3 years, do you see either having another version of it or something at the same complexity and price point level, but maybe a different name or even a different digital, you know, whether it's a Delta Sig versus, or staying with the R2R or something totally new?
Yeah, and another great question. What I can tell you is we're always working on something new. In fact, Yggy got its last serious update, I think, late 2023, where we introduced the More is Better version, which is a very different DAC that actually is probably the best. No, it is certainly the best measuring multi-bit DAC ever in history. That includes, you know, the PCM 63s and the PCM 1704s, all the legendary chips. I mean, we just slaughter those, and it sounds, you know, actually sounds good too. The beyond that, yes, I would love to do an Yggy. I'd love to actually make the Yggy levels more sane. I'd love to have something that is worth selling at, say, $3,000, you know, and something that's worth selling at $2,000. So it's not like, well, should I get the $2,700 one or the $2,400 one? We don't price things based on market. We base it on, you know, what our cost is to actually manufacture. So it results in some oddities like that. Maybe we'll be able to make the Yggy more rational in that way, and maybe it'll be a little while longer. But we are working on it. I'd love to actually have an Yggy that actually has a meaningful performance upgrade that's worth paying for.
Right, right. In terms of R2R technology versus the Delta Sig technology, you and Mike talk about that. I mean, there are different approaches to getting to the same point. Any thoughts about what's out there in that space, whether it's your stuff or some of the crazy $50, $60, $100,000 type of things that are out there? I'm not getting into what's worth what, but in terms of your approach to digital and how you voice your equipment versus something like a Berkeley Audio, which is also in our area, which has a very different approach. And it's a very different sound, and you love that or not or whatever. But it's just, you know, you and Mike have a, you know, when you do the final voicing and where you're going with your equipment, you want it, you know, obviously I find your stuff immensely musical and just lovely to listen to versus listening to the fifth violinist, you know, pass gas in the fourth row back, which, and if that's what someone likes, great. But
exactly.
Yeah, but in terms of approach, in terms of what's out there between the two, do you like the R2R better than the, I'm curious, I mean, can you pick which kid you like more or in,
Yeah, and it is really funny because a lot of the stuff we develop these days, it usually comes down to multiple prototypes and then blind listening to see what we like better. We do that very, very often, and we get different results. 6 months ago, I would have said, yeah, multi-bit all the way. You know, I like our multi-bit stuff, you know, better than even our Delta Sigma approach because I felt it was more natural. Now, I don't know. We've done a lot of blind testing between our Delta Sigma and our multi-bit. And honestly, the majority of people have liked the Delta Sigma approach, which is a big shock. Mike has never been a Delta Sigma guy. I still think he probably doesn't, like it as much as multi-bit. Dave, I think, still likes multi-bit better, but what we've achieved with our new Delta Sigma approach, which I believe is the highest rate, greatest bit depth one probably ever done, is it's odd. It doesn't sound like Delta Sigma. It's very dynamic. It does have a bit of the detail that you'd expect from Delta Sigma, but it's extremely dynamic too, which I usually thought was a hallmark of either our digital filter or multi-bit. I don't know. All the math in our Delta Sigma is actually based on the math from our filter, so maybe that has something to do with it. But all the DAC arguments, they kind of boil down to like, are using Delta Sigma that's already been done by someone. And these days it's like ESS or AKM, or I believe Cirrus is still holding on in there somewhere, and TI has some parts. Are you doing a integrated multi-bit approach, using a integrated multi-bit DAC, which is what we do, which is profoundly weird because most people have moved on to this third option of, hey, we got a discrete multi-bit with a whole bunch of resistors and things driving it. There's no right or wrong approach in my view, and Mike would probably punch me for saying that, but I don't think that there's a right or wrong approach, because Mike kind of thinks that the discrete multi-bit is kind of weird, and he has some kind of valid points about that. But I've heard some that sound really good. So if you can make it sound great, that's wonderful. And then there's kind of this weird 1.5 option now that's some people are doing their own Delta Sigma designs. And Chord's been doing it for a long time. DCS been doing it for a long time. Now we'll be, stepping into that ring. We'll see what happens. You can compare our stuff to Chord and DCS and see what you think about that. But I don't see us going away from multi-bit. I really don't see that going away anywhere in the future. It's probably going to be the thing that probably most of you guys really hate, which is flavors. Which flavor do you like? Do you like Delta Sigma? Do you like multi-bit? And so far, I've liked our new Delta Sigma quite a bit, but I can't actually go and tell you, here's a product we're going to sell with it. Ask me in 6 months.
Okay. Could you release a firmware to make the CD transport a CD-ROM reader to rip CDs?
No, because it's actually a Redbook transport. It's a Streamlink. It's a Streamlink transport, so it is an only Redbook device.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's wrong with TOSlink? Why not add Ethernet to your DAC, interface to Roon, for example?
Well, TOSlink, what's wrong with TOSlink is it's low bandwidth, and it's a fairly mediocre connection as far as if you actually, give it some measurements. If you actually take a look at what the jitter is from that, if you take a look at the bandwidth of that, it's not a great connection. That said, you pretty much have to support it because it's on every TV known to mankind. So it is out there. You do have to deal with it. We deal with it very well, but it's not our favorite. Ethernet's a whole different ballgame. At that point, you have a computer in your device. So Mike and I have long said, we don't want to make a computer unless we can actually, support it the way it should be. Streaming devices are essentially single purpose, sometimes very expensive computers. So we decided to concentrate on Unison USB and actually kind of take the source out of the equation. We decided to do the best USB interface we can And now you can hook that up to a Linux-based streamer or a Windows-based computer or a Mac and get really equivalent performance. That's what we decided to do. And then we also don't, honestly, we don't have to support the software firmware, of a computer ecosystem, nor do we have to worry about these security problems, which we'll see what happens in the future on that. But a lot of stuff you do need to ask, how well is it supported on the security side and for how long? Linux devices will be less apt to have problems. Android, it's worth asking. Yeah. So, and that's why we've kind of stayed out of it. If we ever get into that side of it, or if we ever get into something that really is a more general purpose device, we will staff for it and we will be able to support it. Right now, we aren't.
Fair enough. Okay. Any interest in the home video space, multi-channel?
Yeah, actually, we introduced Syn and Kraken. Syn is essentially a surround processor that also has a headphone amp that also does gaming. It is not your typical surround processor. It supports exactly 0 Dolby formats, exactly 0 DTS formats, exactly 0 any other kind of digital format. It is a matrix processor that actually decodes stereo into surround. And that it's very much more in keeping with the old, Dolby Pro Logic type of thing, except there's no logic, there's no steering in it. It is strictly a matrix thing based on our own matrix, a little bit of our own secret sauce. For me, it actually displaced some very expensive surround processing gear. I don't use any kind of decoder anymore. I only use Syn. And Kraken is just a kind of an audiophile quality 5-channel amp for use with, fairly efficient speakers. It's not super powerful, and I use that as well. I don't expect either of those to achieve, great popularity, but it's something I felt, strongly about as far as I'm getting more and more tired of going down the rabbit hole every time, surround formats change or the interface changes or whatever, but if I never ever have another situation where my HDMI doesn't work because the cables I have are too old, I'll be a very happy man. So that's kind of what bore this.
What gear do you use for personal listening? And can you share your own personal musical tastes and likes?
Boy, I'm probably a bit of a throwback. I do actually enjoy my old 80s music. I do actually still like a lot of more modern EDM. Don't throw up, but Mike does every time I tell him that. On the same token, I do like a lot of simple acoustic music. Anything from Stan Ridgway on up. So it really depends on my mood. As far as personal listening stuff, it's like, well, is it this desk? Is it my other desk in the other house? Is it is it the listening room? I use a broad range of our stuff. Right now, I have one of our little $150 Bailey tube amps here running headphones and a Bifrost 2 DAC. In the living room, I have in this house I have Syn and Kraken because it's a dual purpose thing. It's stereo and video. In the other house, we have a dedicated home theater with Syn and Kraken, and then we have a dedicated listening room with Tier, Yggdrasil, all the big stuff. And actually, I prefer Kara, which is our solid state preamp, over Freya, which is our tube preamp. Now a lot of people probably think I have no taste at all, and that's fine because it's my taste. And actually, I do think Kara sounds quite good, but I do understand tubes do sometimes do the job much better. And that's why I'm sitting here listening to headphones with tubes.
Yeah, on headphones, we talked before we got started that our group has been trying to do more outreach to a younger audience.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly it seems to me that when you talk about people under 30 or even, even younger in the 20s, late teens, listening to music, that it's basically 99% headphones, earbuds, and portability. And can you speak to that? And when, going to the shows and talking to just other people in the industry, that if you're trying to approach and getting younger people into music and better quality, music reproduction, so they understand that listening to an MP3 may be fine, but for a little bit more money, you can just get a much better experience, in terms of that kind of outreach and where you think that's moving in the market right now?
Yeah, and it is developing. When we got into this, it was very easy to reach a younger audience. And in fact, last time I looked, our demographics, I think over 70% of our sales are to people under 35. So we have a very, very young audience. If you actually break that down by cost, you'll see exactly why. It's because we make cheap stuff. We don't need to sugarcoat it with saying, high value or whatever. No, it's cheap. You can get a Magni and a Modi, or actually these days you can get a Magni Unity, which has a DAC in it, for under $200. You can try it out, see if it's for you. It'll run pretty much any headphone on the planet, and it's a pretty no excuses design. It's completely discreet, has lots of power, very low feedback. It's a really, really neat product. As the prices go up, the ages go up, of course. And what we've seen is if we get people started, with low cost products, they will follow us all the way up. Our customers that we got in 2010, 2011, 2012 have kind of followed us all the way up to now. A lot of them will have, a couple of VIDARs, our speaker amp, and a Freya, or they'll have a pair of Tears, or they'll have a whole stack with, the crazy EQs and all the other, nutty stuff that we do, and have spent tens of thousands of dollars, overall on gear. But what you really need to do is you need to provide something they can try easily and inexpensively. And easily is the challenge now, because right now we've gone from earbuds, which are wired, to everyone is wireless. It's all wireless. So the entry point is much more difficult. So you need to pry people out of the wireless experience. And so far we're doing a pretty good job of that. People actually hear what true over-the-ear headphones can do with a real amp. They're going to decide very quickly if that's for them or not for them. But let's face it, a lot of people, audiophile, dumb is not for them. A lot of people are like, no, it's not my thing. I don't understand it. I don't hear it. And that's okay. It's just, we need to give them the opportunity to make that choice. And if everything starts at $1,000 or $5,000, it's really hard to actually make that choice.
So what is your top selling product? How has that changed since you started the company? Mm-hmm. Since you were doing a phono stage, is that an indication that vinyl is here to stay? Well, I would say yes, being a vinyl guy, but...
Oh, yeah. Well, we already do 2 phono stages, so this will be the 3rd. And we're considering a 4th. So, I mean, it's definitely here to stay. And it's definitely an important part of what we do. In fact, we don't typically look at number of units sold, but we do look at sales by revenue. So that's much more interesting. It's like, how much revenue is a product generating? And one that's almost always in the top 3 is Manny, which is our phono preamp. Our little $150 phono preamp is almost always in the top 3 products. Magni and Modi you'll see in the top 10 most of the time. But actually the top 2 are usually Vidar and Bifrost. So it's kind of and those are kind of mid-range, mid-cost products. And interestingly, they're 2-channel products. They aren't headphone products. But it does move around quite a bit. depending on time of the year, Magni and Modi will be much more prevalent towards the end of the year, you know, the selling season, so to speak, when people are in their homes for winter. They're spending more on audio. Right now, this is the slow time of year. And that's why I think we're seeing, you know, Manny and things like that pop up. It is strange, but we do look at it because it's fascinating. And it's nice to know, because we really need to decide where we want to put our resources. Yeah, everything we do has got to be done very well, and it has to be, you know, as bulletproof as we can make it. So we can't go and decide we're going to do, you know, 25 new products tomorrow.
Right. Your wall warts are AC output. Is this to avoid the evil switching warts?
Yes, it is. And I am a believer that linear is better. That there can be lots of arguments, I'm sure, about that. And we do use switchers in some products. Hell and Fulla use switchers, as does Modi and Modius, just because it's easier in those cases to do it. But I do like the flexibility that AC gives us. We can derive quite a few voltages off of that. In fact, a good example is the Skull Phono preamp runs on 64-volt rails, but it has a wall wart that actually has two AC voltages, 24 volts and 6 volts. 6 volts is used just to run the microprocessor and things like that. And the 24 volts is then run through, you know, voltage doubler stacked on top of, you know, a regular rectifier. And then, you know, that's how we get these huge rails. But huge rails and discrete means it has very, very large freedom from overload. You know, it's very difficult to overload a Skull when it can do probably 30 volts RMS out, you know, pretty easily from the differential output, since it's balanced.
Why do you name products after Nordic gods and symbolism?
We thought it was cool. Basically, after we got the name for the company, which was literally my wife just saying, you know, you always have shit to do. You're always telling me you can't do this because you got too much shit to do. Why don't you just call it shit? And realizing that, well, that's very memorable, and we do not have any money to advertise, so maybe not such a bad idea. We kind of took that pseudo-Germanic thing and went, well, what's, you know, what is like that? And it's like we came up with Norse. The ancient Norse were wonderful, and they loved to name everything, not just gods. They named, you know, hammers and chains and, you know, and places and things like that. So we have a million names to choose from. So that's fantastic. Some of them are less easily pronounced than others. I proposed the product be called a Ganunga Gap recently, and that was roundly defeated by everyone at the company. They're like, no, we're not going to do that. Yeah, I think it's actually going to end up being called Yord instead.
Any plans for Schiit to make speakers in the future?
No, I think I want to remain friendly with all the
Especially
speaker
good with
companies
the
out there.
Pardon?
I want to remain friendly with all the speaker companies out there.
Okay.
I'd rather not do that. Plus, I do think that falls into the realm of specialized knowledge, kind of like Phono. My first company that I started just out of college was a speaker building company, and so I know some of the challenges, and I don't think I want to, you know, pick those up again. If we were doing, you know, our own field coil drivers, which Mike has talked about, that's a whole different ballgame. That'd be interesting, because that's something that most people don't do. But that's also, I think, a separate company. So that'd be like a different name, you know, whole different idea. And honestly, I don't really want to run two companies. One is plenty, especially this year.
Fair enough. Are there any speakers that you think sound particularly good with your amps or with your equipment that you
A
do?
lot of them. And the thing is, it's all over the place. You know, in the lab, we will always have, you know, magnaplaners because they're great to demonstrate, what you need high power for. But I also like zoos, which don't need a lot of power. So it's literally all over the map. Like personally, I have zoos, magnaplaners, spatial, and some big things that I built way back when for our old speaker company. And they've now been redone, so they're slightly more competent. But I don't want anyone putting those on one of the turntables and measuring them. I'm sure they're terrifying.
Why use USB versus PCM? PCM is coaxial, shielded versus USB unshielded.
Oh, there's a great reason to use USB, which is we have complete local control of the clocks. If you're actually going to use SPDIF, which is actually do PCM over USB, but if you're talking about USB versus SPDIF or AES, SPDIF and AES are essentially the same format. The problem with SPDIF or AES is the clock is embedded in the signal. So your clock accuracy is determined by how well you can get the clock out of there and then clean it up and recreate it. And we got really good at that. That's one of the things Mike did even back in the Theta days. But with USB, we have a local clock literally right next to the DAC that we have total control over, and it tells the device when to send stuff. So we don't have any jitter issues, clocking issues, things like that. And actually, if you look at even, I wish I had it handy, like a jitter plot even from a $130 Modi, it's like you can't even see what's happening in the jitter side of things.
Have you ever thought about making a standalone clock, a really nicer quality one for value, or just not necessary?
No, I never actually understood that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's weird. You want to have the clock in our world anyway. We want to have the clock physically as close to the device you're clocking as possible, and that's what we do.
Kind of a different subject. So you were at Sumo before, and then you had what other audio companies before Sumo? And how long were you at Sumo? Did you start that? I'm not aware of that.
Sumo actually came in kind of late in the game. Sumo was founded by James Bongiorno, who was then, the company was bought by another kind of a conglomerate. They had another engineer making stuff for them called, his name was Rich May. I came in the post-Rich May era. I was there for 5 years, and I actually kind of specialized in doing amps for them. And I did some of their earliest digital stuff. I don't claim any huge knowledge of DACs, but I can do a really nice analog stage. And that's where I actually met Mike at Theta, and we did some collaborations. The Cobalt 307 by Theta was my design, and I did the analog out in the Theta Gen 5, which was
that's still
the first discrete. Yeah, yeah, that was nuts because Mike was hardcore. Op amps are the best. Look at the measurements. And I'm like, I can do something that measures better than an op amp, in discrete. And he's like, I really don't believe that. So I put together a current input, massively complex thing that had, much less bounce at the summing junction, much higher, overall quality than even he's using like the ADA, the 797, the really expensive op amps back then. And I think even Stereophile called that like the best measuring DAC we've ever looked at for its era. So yeah, it's funny. But after that, I had a hiatus of almost 20 years because the audio market was getting a little weird at during the mid 90s. Things kind of got very expensive, and to be honest, Mike and I felt the value wasn't there. So I actually left and started a marketing agency. So we actually did, some of the earliest web development and things like that. And I did that for a long time. And Schiit only came around as of 2009, because I was like, you know, I'd like to make things again. I would like to maybe actually make a physical product again. And got back into it because headphones were really interesting, and headphone amps being very low power allow us to play with a lot of things that are not as feasible, you know, with speaker amps. If you want a truly pure single-ended Class A headphone amplifier, dead easy. It won't even get that hot. You know, it'll get hot, but it won't get ridiculous. One of the product ideas that we kicked around, and I think thankfully we've decided not to do, is like to do a single-ended Class A amplifier in the tier type form factor, but instead of being two chassis, you know, one for each side, it would be four chassis. So it'd be, you know, two chassis either side. And that thing would probably only put out 20 or 30 watts. I mean, it wouldn't be a powerful amp, but they'd weigh 110 pounds each, and they'd probably, you know, have a combined power draw in, you know, about 2,000 watts. It's nuts, but, you know, for a headphone that needs a handful of watts at most, and honestly, most of them don't even need that much, it's feasible. For speakers, yeah, a lot more difficult. Also, I don't know how thrilled people would be with, like, say, a $7,000 set of 20-watt amplifiers from us.
Oh, there'd be some people, but the bigger market, probably not. So
yeah, and it's funny. And also, we don't want to go too crazy on this. It's like we are a direct sale company, so you know we're aware of, you know, people need to put their credit card in to buy things. I'd feel really strange, you know, putting in a credit card and buying $10,000 worth of stuff, you know, from us or from anyone. I think it's a little odd.
Well, I have a lot of people wanted you to talk about your science fiction writing and what you like in science fiction, what are your favorite science fiction movies. So you want to eat on that, you know, I'm not talk about some of that and get into that a little bit, or
I love lowbrow science fiction movies. My favorite science fiction movie of all time is probably Fifth Element, which has got to be one of the dumbest movies ever made, but it's fun. So, you know, that might kind of, you know, turn everyone off to what I'm talking about. But yeah, I got about 30 or, yeah, about somewhere between 30 and 40 short stories published, and 3 novels. One was called Winning Mars, which is these days, if you look at what Elon's doing, it basically predicted, you know, a lot of that stuff. It was essentially, you know, Survivor on Mars results in Mars being colonized. And that was many, many years ago. And then I did a couple of books that were actually military sci-fi, and it crossed up actually Japanese mecha and military science fiction. Those were the mecha core novels. But you know, mainly what I'm known for, if anything, in sci-fi, because I'm not really active, is typically alternate history. I won some awards for some of my alternate history stuff that I did. But those were, you know, those were novellas. They weren't novels. So those typically don't get a lot of views. So anyway, that's, you know, I'd like to start writing again. I wrote the first news story I did in probably 5 years, about a couple months ago. So maybe I'll write a little bit more. But honestly, running this company is, you know, especially when we're moving, has been really interesting.
that's great. Leslie wanted to know, what are your predictions for the future? Maybe talk about AI within your realm.
Yeah, and we're actually using AI right now. If you actually go to our site and, you know, hit you know, contact us, first thing you'll get is a thing we call Schiit Talker, which is our AI that is of moderate usefulness. It actually can answer a reasonable number of questions. It can definitely get you to the right, you know, the right point if you need to actually contact us. But we're having a little bit of fun with that. I have heard all sorts of, you know, pronouncements about AI kind of taking over, electronic design or at least PC board layout and stuff like that. And I don't know, haven't seen it yet. But things are changing very rapidly. And honestly, having more computing power in something, I think, could be very, very useful. And that's where I'm like, the current trend right now is to, streamers that are inexpensive and easy to afford. And it's like, that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is kind of look at, what could you do with, maximal computing power. And I think we will be introducing some devices that will play with that. Probably not on a general purpose computing platform. But the future, I think, will be more what do you want to listen to? Rather than, is it the artist's intent? And that, I know that's controversial and not necessarily good, but I could easily envision a future where it's like, well, I would like to hear 80s synth pop, but remix it all in the style of Stan Ridgway in the later years, not like when he was at Wall of Voodoo. And literally, it will produce that for you. Now, the copyright implications, the personal implications of like, what happens when you each have your own silo, made to your own needs. That stuff's scary. But we are rapidly getting to the point where we'll be able to do that. And I can't speculate on where that's going to go.
Here's a question. Do you feel SpaceX when it launches near your facility?
Actually, they're about a 3-hour drive away.
Okay, so not so close. Okay.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't mind seeing one of the launches. It's got to be crazy, but I have never actually made it down to see one of the big Starship launches anyway. I know that one of our guys went and saw one of the launches in Florida, but he's a big space nut. He's been to Johnson Space Center a bunch of times, and I don't know. Hey, everything's changing right now. I really hope musically we can actually honor the artist's intent and enjoy it, and not just like have it make everything into a mush of what we want to hear. But when that capability is there, what's going to happen? What happens to Spotify? What happens to Qobuz?
Oh, do you ever get to the Bay Area? We would love to have you come and meet you in person if you ever come out this way.
Yes, I do. And I was there last year. I would have been there this year, except there's just too many things. Every day is like, 2 or 3 kind of critical decisions.
Right.
So I've been concentrating on being here.
Does Schiit go to a lot of shows for many?
Not a lot. We are, I believe we're going to the show. We do a couple of can jams. There has been talk about us doing our own show. We've done one of our own shows together with Emotiva up in Austin. So now there's some talk of like, should we bring it back, make it bigger? This is all just talking. Please don't come and try to sign up for the Schiit show.
I was going to say the name would be obvious. So
yes.
Yeah.
Or not. I mean, maybe it's not really about us. Maybe it is just a place for, more affordable audio, or maybe it's just, I don't know.
Personally, I can't speak for anyone else, but I think having a show that focuses on really high quality, lower expensive, reasonably cost, as opposed to most of their shows where you walk into a room and every piece is $60,000 to $100,000. And yeah, it sounds great. And then you walk into a show like yours where every piece is less than 2,000 and more about 200 to 300, and it sounds within 10 or 20% of some of the other systems. I mean, that would be really interesting. So
yeah, no, or I mean, here's the thing too. I mean, shows, I'd love to see a show that just said, hey, everyone has the same room and setup. You know, you can't buy a ballroom. It's like everyone gets the same room, same setup. Bring your best thing that fits in this, you know, hotel room, which is a fairly normal size listening room. And that's it. You know, oh, and you can't buy ads, you can't buy the stairs, you can't buy the windows, you can't buy the, you know, like all, you know, shows, it seems like it's like if you want to put stickers on fruit with your, you know, company name on it, they probably let you do that. It's like, maybe let's just get together, see what, you know, see what works in a normal room. But then again, how many people are coming to shows to see the big crazy stuff? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that.
Are you seeing more women purchasing your products? And if so, which ones?
Sadly, not much. It really is you know, I hate the euphemism, a male-dominated industry, but yeah, it seems like it's mainly guys. We have actually our head of algorithms, algorithmic development, she has a math PhD. Yeah, she's a woman, and she doesn't buy our stuff. So, yeah, we actually have to send it to her. But she loves, you know, she loves actually listening to it. But I think she probably finds it a bit alienating because a lot of the assumptions we might make about how something should work have not been highly tested. And I think that goes for every company. You know, what should it look like? What should it work like? What should it feel like? I don't think any company really has the wherewithal to do lots and lots of testing on that. So we're doing our best with what we have, but we could be wrong.
Do power-hungry planar magnetic headphones have a place in your amp lineup?
Oh yeah, pretty much anything will drive it except for Valhalla 2 or pure tube amp. No chance, but literally everything. There's a discussion about, I believe, not the tungsten. Tungstens are one of the most difficult to drive headphones, but they were talking about HE6s. And you know, they told me what the requirements were, and they're like, "Oh, we're so happy that, you know, that Jotunheim can do that." And I said, "Well, if that's really the requirements, Magni will do that." And that's our $120 headphone amp. So yeah, no problem with power.
Here's a question. Have you put any thought into trying to market to women specifically?
I haven't thought about it because we don't do a ton of marketing. We do a little tiny bit of advertising and, you know, the normal, you know, hi-fi magazines. We have a fairly small, you know, Google ad presence. We advertise a bit on Amazon, but we haven't actually directly tried that. I don't know. And actually, if you look at the demographics of people that buy our stuff, if you actually look at the, you know, the Google demographics, it is shockingly male. I mean, it's definitely under 5% as far as, you know, our purchasers being women. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer. I've tried to do campaigns for other companies before I had Schiit. I did some campaigns to try to broaden, you know, the acceptance of audio and audiophiles, and it's really difficult. People really do self-select.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a good example is there are people who will drink you know, coffee out of a pot and be perfectly happy. Some people are going to want Starbucks. Some people are going to want a $3,600 you know, super automatic machine from Jura to make their coffee, and some people are going to want a $10,000 hand pulled, you know, brass boiler, you know, hand tamped, you know, espresso shot. And if I came up to you and said, yeah, hey, you know, the only great coffee is out of a $10,000 machine that has like these dials on it that you have to run yourself, you'd be like, yeah, I'm cool. I don't want any coffee at all. Yeah, I just stay away from that. Yeah. So there has to be steps up to that so people can decide where they want to go. And that's what we're trying to do. That's probably our biggest thing is make some affordable gear so people can try it out and make decisions.
in terms of digital, again, if Mike was here, it might be a better question for him, but do you think there's like a lot of room to grow in terms of quality and resolution and getting closer to analog, if that really is the ultimate goal, or that's what people talk about? I don't know. I'm not sure that's necessarily true, but do you think we're kind of at a plateau and there's a lot of playing around the edges and tweaking and or do you think there's still quantum jumps with further technology and computing power over the next 10 years or so to go on this? Or
I think there's reasonable room to go farther, especially now that we have access to a lot of recordings that are 2496 or 24192, native, and actually are native through some of the streaming services. There's reasonable chances for advancement. I don't think you're going to see quantum difference night and day. But there's definitely room for advancement at the top, and then a lot of room to bring it down to the lower end. We do, like I said, we do a lot of blind, what we call blind listening, which means it's not an ABX test. It's like it is blind and level matched, but you choose the music, you listen as long as you want, and you just know if one device is which device is playing, and we just ask which one do you like better. So we know there's a reasonable amount of work we can do to move digital forward, especially at the at the lower end. But oh boy, it really comes down to there's not a lot of new DACs being developed. It's not like when Mike was at Theta. It's like almost every year there was a new integrated multi-bit DAC out. Now there's not even a new integrated Delta Sigma DAC out every year. So everyone's going to be using similar stuff. There are tricks that can be applied, of course, but when you're starting from the same base, the opportunities are more limited.
right.
And that's why we kind of went and started developing some of our own tech.
In that regard, in terms of searching for highest resolution, there are obviously DACs out there that'll do 32-bit, that'll do 512, and I believe like the Yggy, which is your top of the line DAC, goes up to 192. Is that right? Do some people say, I mean, obviously the beginning recording, some Redbook CDs sound better than some insanely high res recordings because it was done right the first time. But in general, do you think going after the highest resolution possible, being able to have your DACs do native 32, 300 or 512 DSD, DXD, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's that important, or do you think it's more important to get the analog output right, being the analog guy? Some people feel that's much more important than even what type of chip you're using. So maybe if you could speak on that.
Yeah, and we've actually gotten a lot of questions because hilariously our least expensive products such as Fulla will do 32 384, but our higher end product, the Unison USB products, will only do 32 192. The reason for that is because they're isolated. They actually have transformer isolation between the source and the product itself, which has a fixed speed. So we can do a hardware change and we can get that up to 384, and we're considering that, but that's fine. Why we haven't focused on that a lot is if you look at the music that's out there, the music that most people will listen to, whether they're using Qobuz or Tidal, or any of the higher end, lossless streaming services, it will top out at 24 192 or 32 192. There's really nothing, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen anything in 32 384. So at that point, you're talking about upsampling in the computer. If you want to upsample to 32,384 or to 768, or who knows, maybe some of them even do 1.5 megahertz now, that's a whole different argument. That's you're deciding to apply a transformation to the music. That's fine. That's valid. If you like it better, that's great. Unfortunately, our DACs will not support it. And I don't really see us going much over 384 in the future, because DXD is 24,352, and you can do 32,384, and that seems to be about the top of actual recording, as opposed to upsampled content.
Is there anything we haven't asked that you want to touch upon, Jason? Or
oh boy, not really. I think it'd be interesting to revisit this in 6 months after we have our big weird product announcement, because I really do think it's going to surprise a lot of people, and I think it might have a fairly decent impact on the industry. So we'll see.
that's exciting. Well, we would definitely love to have you back, maybe, sometime next year. Okay, Larry, do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Sure. You were talking about not many women, females purchasing your products, but that seems to be, I know, to me, where your advertising, your limited budgets are going there. Have you ever considered, or why not ever spend some of your limited resources for female-oriented sites, mags, or anything that women might go to? I mean, if they don't see any information about this company, they're not going to be buying your products.
That's true. It really comes down to ROI. Google comes to us very regularly because we have very, very good ROI on our ad spend. In fact, it's so good, they do not know how we're doing it. The main thing is we actually are highly targeted. So essentially, if there's a high probability someone's going to buy our products, we will be there. Right now, I don't think that we have the resources to actually go on an expedition to see if we can convert a non-typical audience, just because the resources to actually get the awareness and then actually get sales from that are much, much larger. So that's why we haven't done it.
Leslie, do you want to chime in and ask yourself?
I'm the one that throws in all the suggestions. Make your gear in pink. And then women love it. All you gotta do is spray paint it pink, and it'll sell like hotcakes. Or you could actually just send some pink gear to some female influencers. And that would be very inexpensive. But I personally think it's an untapped market. Women just aren't looking at this in the same places that men are. But see, Barbie edition headphone amp. There we go.
All right.
No, I mean, you're in a unique position because your product has very interesting kind of sex appeal. It's well priced. It's a great product. It's highly memorable. See, Lori is seconding me. The only other woman I think actually, we have one other. Jan was on there. Jan is too. So I think we have 3 women in our group that regularly come on. So we've somehow broken in a little bit. See, Jan, as well.
The ratio is remarkably small, though. 3 women in this club, and how many men?
I know, but I think we probably have 3 more than other clubs have. So we've got something going for us. But
I don't know why I'm different. Why did I become interested in audio? I've been interested since I was 15.
And so have I.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I know a lot of women that they don't focus on the gear side so much. And your products are kind of easily accessible and easy to work with, right? So they're kind of potentially good gateway drugs for young budding women audiophiles. And with the resurgence of vinyl, I know I have 3 20-something-year-old sons who have, two have girlfriends, and they're all into vinyl.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
so
mean, there's gotta be something more we can do. Right now, I think we're kind of trying to digest an elephant this year, and next year might be, the year that we actually take a look at that. I'd love to know, what we could do to make it more appealing. It's,
Okay, well,
if simplicity is part of that, I'd love to get back to even more simpler gear than we're doing now.
yeah, it's just somewhere that's easy, that sounds good, easy place to start, and is attractive. Because there's the wife acceptance factor that seems to weigh in on a lot of things. But you have a small form factor. It's easily gussied up with colors and things like that. So.
But women only want gussied up color things? Come on, that's great.
Not that men are not, because there's many men that are very into very attractive things, obviously. But women tend to like things that are, less apparent.
Hey, Leslie.
Yes.
Okay, so here's a little anecdote for you. I just got back last night from a big JBL Harman new product line reveal down in Northridge at their research center. It was a huge deal. Like 70 writers from all over the world were sent there, and they had their one of their senior engineers from their division called Human, which is where they study marketing trends, everything about what makes people buy and listen to things. So he's the expert on that. And they'd spent something like $500,000 on their research for these new products. And he looks at me and he says, can I ask you something? He said, how do you feel about having speakers in your living room? Do you mind? Do you think of it like furniture? And I just looked at him and I said, you'll have to ask my husband that, because he's the one who yells when I tow things in. And, and he just looked at me really puzzled, like, and then the light went on and he was really embarrassed when he realized that I was the one that was dealing with those speakers. So even at that level of a company like JBL, they haven't gotten the message yet. That's all.
No.
Yeah.
Good comment.
It's definitely a market we need to take a lot longer look at. It's just, oh boy, it is just getting into probably too many things this year. You'll understand. When we introduce our new idea, I think it might actually kind of dovetail into this, but we'll see.
That'll be exciting.
We could schedule another Zoom, or you can come visit us in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And we would love to host you. We will ply you with as much beer or wine as you would like. Get you to talk.
I don't. It's funny. I don't drink that much these days, but since every time I do one of these, I usually have a glass of wine or a beer. People are like, "Is he an alcoholic?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm an alcoholic." My secret's out. No, but I do like having a beer, a glass of beer or wine when I do this, and it just turned into a habit. So there you go.
I think there's a few of us that like wine or beer as well. So you're among friends.
Yeah, I was surprised that actually there's some very good Texas wines, and I never thought I'd be saying that ever in my entire life. So.
Huh.
Yeah.
I think you're in Texas. You should come up with like a Texas shit cooler. That a little macho. It'll play music. It'll stream. It'll keep your beer cold. I mean, it might be a market.
I call it the shit kicker. Yeah.
Exactly.
Boom.
Yeah. No, it is. It's very weird. It's very weird being here because we're still going back and forth to California, but we're getting to the end stages of getting everything here. So. After that, I'll be able to travel for fun and see you guys and stuff like that. But until then, it's kind of like back and forth for business, and it's like it's been a long year. Let's just put it that way.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
We have a very, very welcoming group. So if you can ever come to do an in-person event, we would just totally love to have you. So I think.
Cool. I'd love to do it. It's like. I do want to do more traveling and meeting groups and things like that. That'll be part of next year. This year was kind of like the sacrificial year, unfortunately, where you just do what you have to do.
Well, to grow a company, you got to have moments like that. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is funny. Yeah, we have a lot of people here who ask me, what's it like starting a company? How do you do it? And I'm like, well, get used to sacrifice and get used to watching the money kind of flow past. That's cash flow, flows past, but you don't get to touch any of it. So yeah, and they're like, that sounds horrible. I'm like, yeah, but I'm unemployable, so you might as well actually start a company.
Well, you've done an amazing job and very, very rapidly become a real, actually kind of an inspiration, I think, for a lot of other companies. Because when you started, I don't know that there was anyone doing what you're doing exactly at that price point, that quality.
And honestly, we need more companies. We need more audio companies because it's, the guys who are experimenting with ideas, including ideas I say, oh, I don't think we'll do that, or I think that's wrong, or whatever. Please experiment with it and, prove me wrong. We need more people doing that rather than like everyone doing the same thing at the same price point with the same feature set. It's like, sorry, that gets really old really fast.
and other than some of the stuff coming out of Asia, in the US, there's not a lot of new companies, and it's the same old, the aesthetics, the Carey, whatever. But that kind of list. You got Berkeley, you got MSB, you guys, but the newer companies that have come, that have really started in the US in the last 8 to 10 years is very, very few. Very few.
Yeah, and if we can help launch some of those new companies in the coming years, I'd be happy to do that. There are going to be a lot of things we don't want to do. We may never do like a computer-based streamer, or nor a standard OS-based streamer. We may never do speakers. I'd love to actually see some other companies get off the ground and do that. I'd love to see some companies prove me wrong, because I have my opinions and not everyone agrees with me, and it's like, cool, let's prove me wrong. I'd love to see it. So, even Mike ate his words on USB.
Right. Very good. Well, we're at an hour and a half, so I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you very much, Jason. It was really a pleasure having you on with our members today, and very enlightening, very interesting. You're a great speaker. I for one, hope you get back to writing some more science fiction. I like old school. I have a collection of everything Larry Niven ever wrote, and I reread it, and I reread it, and I reread it, and I mean, some of them I've read 20 times. I get the same pleasure every time. I just love that classic stuff. So,
yeah, I remember it, up until mid 2000 aughts, we were actually going to LASFS, the LA area Science Fiction Society, and yeah, we actually Larry Niven and Jerry Purnell both were there like every Thursday. So yeah, it's a group I'd like to get back into. It's just again,
no, not this year for sure, but
so eventually, yeah, it'd be a lot of fun.